So with that in mind, let's now talk about diagramming rules. And at this point, I want to emphasize, we're just taking each rule at face value. We're not combining rules. We're not doing any of that at this point. We're just focusing on how to diagram them. So the first rule says A is ranked as the third fastest runner. Notice how for this one, I can add that directly to my game board, right? And a good rule of thumb to go by is if you can diagram it directly onto the game board, then you should, okay? Just because that makes things so much clearer, right? So for example, this is the best way to diagram. I've seen some people do this, subscript 3 off to the side. And technically speaking, this is accurate, right? But it doesn't really tell the whole picture. If I take this away and I just have A3 off to the side, it starts to make it look like F could go here and D could go here. And I have to kind of do the extra work of looking over here to identify that they actually cannot. So rather than doing that, just put it directly onto that slot. Next up, we have B is not ranked as the second fastest runner. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to place B underneath and I'm going to slash it. And I'm also going to put a box around it. The reason for the box is that I want to differentiate between my rules and my deductions. So later on, you might start deducing, okay, B can't go into slot 1, B can't go into slot 5, but there's going to be certain situations within questions where you actually need to tell that the rule is different from the deductions. Okay, so this helps you not get mixed up there. Another thing I want you to note is I'm keeping things very organized in my setup. Down here, I'm going to put my negative rules or rules that tell me where something cannot go. Up here, I'm going to put my positive rules or the rules that tell me where something can or must go. And it's very important that we keep things organized because keep in mind, we're not being graded on how we diagram, right? The LSAT is never going to ask us, how would you diagram this particular rule? That's not going to be a question. So, but the purpose of the diagram is it's going to be a cheat sheet, right? It's something that we need to be able to reference to help us answer the questions. So we need to have it very organized so that we know exactly where to look very quickly. Otherwise, we're going to spend unnecessary time sorting through all the information that we have, or even worse, missing certain key pieces of information as well, okay? So always keep it organized in that way. Next up, we have F is ranked either first or fourth. Okay, so this is providing two different options for F. I still don't know exactly where F goes. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to actually have F hovering above the game board with arrows pointing to its options, okay? Next up, we have E and D must be consecutively ranked. Does anyone want to give this one a try? What would that look like?
You're right next to each other with the till, whether E is before or D, it's just right next to each other.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand correctly, is it looking like this, ED? Is there anything I should add here?
Yeah, a switch on the top between E and D. We don't know which one comes first or the second.
Very good, exactly. And so we're also going to put a box around it. So the box indicates that we know the exact distance between them, right? So in this case, E and D are right next to each other. So that's the exact distance. I can't have any more slots between. But, and very good catch with the switch, right? Notice how we don't know the exact order. We just know that they are next to each other. Very good. Does anyone want to give the next one a try with E and F?
So we know we can push it back to the previous rule. We know that F is either 1 or 4.
So that's a very good observation. You're absolutely right. But just for the purpose of this exercise, we're actually just taking one single rule and we're just going to diagram it. So we're not really looking at previous rules at this point in time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So how would I diagram just that one?
Okay, so we can have E 2 dash, at least 2 dash, put a at least sign on the bottom and just write F and then have a till. We don't know whether E or F, which one comes first. So
very good. And how do you diagram the at least, just out of curiosity?
Oh, it's more like a sign and, you know.
Is it kind of like that one?
Like that, yeah.
Gotcha.
Two on the bottom.
Cool. Yeah, that works totally fine as well. What I personally do is I just put a plus sign, but either one of those works just great. And you're absolutely right about the switch as well. And notice how in this case, I don't know the exact distance between the two, right? It could be 2, it could be 3. I only know the minimum. And so for that reason, I'm not putting a box around it, just to really emphasize that point. But very good observation. And for those of you who attempted this, who maybe didn't see that, notice how just one tiny word can make a huge difference, right? Just that at least completely changes the meaning of the rule. So that's why we have to read the rules very carefully. Okay, next up we have C is faster than D. Now, in this case, I again don't know the distance between C and D, right? But I don't even have a minimum here. So C and D could be next to each other, or they could be on complete opposite ends of the game board. So how I'm going to diagram this one is you kind of have two options. You can either use an ellipses, so C dot 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 D, or you could do C with a dash to D. Okay. Now, one thing to also keep in mind is sometimes you're going to have the same relationship with multiple entities. So for example, what if I have a rule that says C is faster than D and F? Okay. So then in this case, sure, I could diagram them out as two separate statements. So I could have C is faster than D and C is faster than F. But one thing to note here is I have the same entity being repeated. Whenever that happens, I want to try to combine them if possible. And so I can actually combine these two to look like this. And that's exactly what you want to do. Just make sure to keep in mind, though, that at this point in time, we don't know the order between D and F, right? We only know the order between C and D and C and F, and that's it. Okay. So D could go before or after F. And then finally, we have only B or C can be ranked fifth. Does anyone want to give this a try? Is this a positive or negative rule? And can I diagram this directly onto the game board?
You
So you
could
could put
sorry, go ahead.
slash C on the number 5.
I'm sorry, what was that? Could you repeat that again?
You could put B dash C on the 5th spot. Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah.
You are absolutely right. Very well done. And so this will indicate to me that these are the only two entities that could go there.